Now we will look at the Feast of Weeks or Pentecost. A little more familiar probably, Pentecost. Look at verse 15. And you shall count for yourselves from the day after the Sabbath, from the day that you brought the sheaf of the wave offering. So that Feast of First Fruits. Okay, after you do that, so it says you shall count for yourselves from the day after the Sabbath. What day would that be? Does anybody know? The day after the Sabbath?
Sunday.
What's that?
Sunday.
Sunday, yes. The first day of the week, which is what today is. Isn't that kind of strange that today is the first day of the week? I don't think of it that way. I always think of Monday being the first day of the week. And everybody has such a hard time on Monday. Oh, I hate Mondays. And, you'll see the Monday posts tomorrow on your social media. Oh, Monday, whatever. But in reality, today's the first day of the week. And we start our week every week celebrating God and remembering Him and focusing on Him. So better to think of it that way. So verse 15, you shall count for yourselves from the day after the Sabbath, from the day that you brought the sheaf of the wave offering, 7 Sabbaths shall be completed. So, Feast of First Fruits, wave offering, the Sabbath after that. We want to go the day after. Is it getting confusing yet? I know. Day after, then you're going to count from that point. 7 Sabbaths have to pass. And in verse 16, he says, count 50 days to the day after the 7th Sabbath. What? Then you shall offer a new grain offering to the Lord. 50 days after the Feast of the First Fruits, at the completion of the wheat harvest. Okay, so a lot of these, they coincided with their planting or their crops and their produce. Verse 17. You shall bring from your dwellings, your houses, 2 wave loaves of 2/10 of an ephah. They shall be of fine flour. They shall be baked with leaven. They are the first fruits to the Lord. You shall offer with and you shall offer with the bread 7 lambs of the first year, without blemish, 1 young bull, and 2 rams. They shall be as a burnt offering to the Lord, with their grain offering and their drink offerings, an offering made by fire for a sweet aroma to the Lord. It's interesting. This just reminded me. Thursday and Friday, we had a family funeral going on. Pretty much all day events, and this was for my wife's side of the family for her grandfather. But I found myself back in the Catholic Church on Friday for the church service. It is just so interesting. I rarely ever go to Catholic Church, obviously. It's usually for events like this. And I hadn't been there in a long time. But at one point during the service, the Catholic priest who was doing the service officiating, he came around and he did this ceremony with incense. It's a metal ball on a chain, and it's got some heat, some kind of fire inside of it, and then he'll put a couple of scoops of incense on there, and then he walks around and he does this certain part of the ceremony. And it's just interesting for me to smell it, and it just immediately takes me back to like when I was real young. And again, when I was real young, occasionally I would go to church. I didn't go every week. I thought I was a Catholic. I was a wannabe. I wasn't really a Catholic. But just the same, it's the same smell. And it's just interesting how sometimes, smells can take you right back to something, from years ago. Does that ever happen with you guys? Yeah, you smell something? Yeah. And it just immediately takes you back. Sometimes you can have like this really good, really cool memory of something that happened when you were younger. Or it could even be a bad thing. You remember a smell and then you just think, oh man, I remember something from the past and whatever. It could be a bad thing. But here, we don't know what these smells are, but they would have known. all the different smells. And in this case, in verse 18, they were to bring these offerings, and then it says at the end of verse 18, an offering made by fire for a sweet aroma to the Lord. So not only would it be a sweet aroma to the Lord, but they would remember the smell also. Verse 19, then you shall sacrifice one kid of the goats. Okay, that's not your younger brother or sister. Then you shall sacrifice one kid of the goats as a sin offering, and 2 male lambs of the first year as a sacrifice of a peace offering. So they have this sin offering, the peace offering. The priest shall wave them with the bread of the first fruits as a wave offering before the Lord, with the 2 lambs. They shall be holy to the Lord for the priest. Now, all these different offerings, if you're thinking, well, what exactly, what did they do? And you can always go back in Leviticus and find, because they're described, what you're supposed to do with them and the parts, and take these pieces and all the different things, okay? We won't go back over that right now. But they were to bring all these offerings. Verse 21, you shall proclaim on the same day that it is a holy convocation to you. Anybody remember what convocation means? Anybody? Convocation? Yes.
Assembly?
Yes. Very good. Thank you very much. Assembly. Yeah, this holy assembly to you. There it is again. God wants them to gather. It's to be a holy assembly. Verse 21, here's our favorite part. You shall do no customary work on it. Holiday. No work. It shall be a statute forever in all your dwellings throughout your generations. When you reap the harvest of your land. There it is again, produce. You shall not wholly reap the corners of your field when you reap, nor shall you gather any gleaning from your harvest. You shall leave them for the poor and for the stranger. I am the Lord your God. I love this. Part of this Feast of Weeks or Pentecost, part of it was that they would be mindful of the poor or even the stranger. When people are different from us, we have a hard time oftentimes caring for them. When people are different from us, we have a hard time caring for them. If they look different, if they were raised differently, if they dress differently, or their hair's different, or their skin color is different, even sometimes we have a hard time drawing near to them or really caring for them because they look different. And I love this. We see the heart of God here, that he has concern not only for the poor, but also for the stranger. I like that. I love that. You and I have got to be so careful. We've all been raised. I kind of caught the beginnings of it when I was younger. You've got to be careful. Stranger danger. Don't get in the car with a stranger. You have a code word with your family so that if somebody shows up and says, hey, I'm your Uncle Chris and I'm here to pick you up from school, you have a code word, so that if that individual doesn't know the code word, you're not getting in that car. You know what I mean? If it's like, if you don't know who it is, and we've all been warned with that. When I was younger growing up, I was still kind of living free when I was younger, out riding my bike all over town, all day long. But then as I got a little bit older, my parents were a little more careful and a little more careful, and okay, but here we see that God is concerned not only for the poor, those who were different, those who didn't have money, those who couldn't afford, but he was also concerned for the stranger, those that were different. It's rough being different, isn't it? It's rough being different. When you join a new team or go to a new school or, even starting a new grade, going from junior high to high school, oh man. Like you go from elementary school into junior high and there might be some anticipation, like, okay, yeah, you gotta, kind of grow up, get a little bit bigger, kind of, whatever. But then going from junior high to high school is horrifying. It's terrifying. Especially if you don't really have any friends. You know, maybe you're going to a new school and you don't really know anybody there. But even going from Plaza to Amaro, oh man, what do they do in that high school room, you know? And then you show up and realize, oh, it's different, no doubt. But it's, you know, they're not beating us up when we come into the high school room, or, you know, they're not sacrificing chickens over there or anything. You know, it's like, okay, it's pretty normal. He's weird, but it's pretty normal. Being different is tough. And we're always thankful for those individuals that when we do come into a new scenario, a new surroundings, we're always thankful for that individual who welcomes us, aren't we? That's always a good thing. And oftentimes those individuals can become lifelong friends. You know, you go into some new place and there might be one person that, you know, comes up and, hey, you know, how you doing? What's up? What's your name? Whatever. Okay, come on, sit with me. And there are some of you that do that so well. That you see somebody new, see somebody different, and hey, how you doing? What's your name? Oh, you don't know anybody? Okay, well, why don't you come and sit over here? I'm going to sit over here. Why don't you, see my stuff? See my Bible over there? Why don't you sit by me? You know, and we're so very thankful. And that's the heart of God. Those of us that have that ability and that gifting to like step out of our own comfort zone and, you know, get in somebody's face and like, hey, you know, what's your name? And it's good to see you and welcome. Man, that's something, you know, God's using you to do that. And don't stop doing that. Keep doing that. You know, especially in here. You know, especially at church or a youth event where people are coming looking for something different from the world. You know, when you go into the world, you'll have, you know, just like, oh my gosh, he or she is weird and they're different, and, you know, just kind of like, oh, don't talk to them. But in here, it should be the opposite of that. We should be welcoming people in. So we want to make sure that we're doing that. And it's not just for the leaders to do, like, oh, I don't know, that person's weird, but Pastor Chris is here. He can talk to them. No, you go talk to them. You go extend, you know, an invitation. And, hey, how you doing? And talk to them, okay? God's heart is concerned for the stranger. And here, as part of this Feast of Weeks or Feast of Pentecost, he tells them during that time, as you are clearing your fields, you're to leave the corners. You're to leave the corners so that strangers or the poor can come through and pick some of your crops. So we don't like that because we're Americans, man. And I planted this seed and I'm going to harvest every single bit of it. I'm getting my money's worth, man. But the heart of God is to bless others. And let's provide for others. This is God's, in a sense, his welfare system here. Okay? This repeats the command of Leviticus 19:9-10. This was a law to provide a means for the poor and the stranger to eat by working for themselves and gleaning what was left behind. This was an appropriate reminder after the law concerning the harvest feast of Pentecost. The Feast of Pentecost obviously is connected with the birth of the church and the harvest resulting. Remember Acts chapter 2. Significantly, in the ceremony at the Feast of Pentecost, 2 unleavened loaves of bread are waved as a holy offering to God, speaking of the bringing of unleavened Gentiles into the church. There is also, this was real interesting, there is also good evidence that each of the 4 feasts relevant to the first coming, that coincide with the first coming of Jesus, saw their prophetic fulfillment on the exact day of that particular feast. Jesus was crucified on the Passover. His body would have been buried in his holy and pure sacrifice, acknowledged by God the Father during the Feast of Unleavened Bread, and he would have risen from the dead on first fruits, the day after Passover Sabbath. The church was founded on the day of Pentecost. Let me read something to you here. For this reason, many speculate it would be consistent for God to gather his people to himself at the rapture on the day of the Feast of Trumpets. And obviously, I'm not putting any dates or anything on the rapture or God's, I'm not putting any specific dates. Just interesting, just interesting to think about. Now, between the first set of 4 feasts and the second set of 3 feasts, which we're about to start, there is a significant time gap, almost 4 months, which significantly was a time of harvest in Israel. Even at our current age, is a time of harvest for the church. In Romans 11:25 talks about until the fullness of the Gentiles has come in. The harvest is still taking place. The second group of the last 3 feasts relates to the events connected with the second coming of Jesus. Let's pick it up in verse 23. The Feast of Trumpets, or you may have heard of it as Rosh Hashanah. Verse 23. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the children of Israel, saying, in the 7th month, on the first day of the month, you shall have a Sabbath rest, a memorial of blowing of trumpets, a holy convocation, assembly. So on the first day of the month of Tishri, on the Jewish ceremonial calendar, the Feast of Trumpets was held. Trumpets were blown to gather together God's people. There's the gathering again. Let's all get together. Always fun to gather with people, right? Whether it be our church family or your relatives, your family at home, to gather with everybody is always fun. Always food involved, celebrating. Even for me at the end of this week at the funeral, though we were celebrating someone who had passed in his life, and there was some sadness there, still, it's a Hispanic family. It was way too much food, and we got together afterwards, and they were playing music and all that kind of stuff, and it was a lot of fun just to be there. Verse 25: you shall do no customary work on it. Again, it's a time of rest. You shall offer an offering made by fire to the Lord. The Feast of Trumpets speaks of the ultimate assembly of God's people at the sound of a trumpet. 1 Thessalonians 4. Remember that where Paul talks about the rapture, and we'll hear the trumpet call of God, and the dead in Christ will rise first, and we who are remain and are left will be gathered together with them in the clouds. So the gathering of Israel, and the gathering of Israel for the special purpose God has for them in the last days. Because, don't let anybody lie to you, God is not done with Israel. Okay? God is still has plans for Israel, still working in the Jewish people, and He's not done with them. Let's move on to the next one, verse 26, which gets us to the Day of Atonement, or Yom Kippur. Verse 26, and the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, also the 10th day of the 7th month shall be the Day of Atonement. It shall be a holy assembly for you. You shall afflict your souls and offer an offering made by fire to the Lord. This is interesting because the other feasts that we've been reading about have to do with celebration, man, having a good time. Don't work. Relax, bring food, gather together. This is the one that says, afflict your souls. You're to humble yourselves. There's to be a time of reflection and understanding that, hey, we're sinful. We need atonement. And he says at the end of verse 27 that there's to be an offering made by fire to the Lord. So on the 10th of Tishri, the people gathered again for a holy assembly. This was not a celebration feast, but a day, as it says here, to afflict your souls in humble recognition of one's sin and need for atonement. Verse 28, you shall do no work on the same day. It is the Day of Atonement, to make atonement for you before the Lord for your God. For any person who is not afflicted in soul on that same day shall be cut off from his people. So serious business, man. You better be reflecting and really afflicting your soul and saying, okay, I need the Lord. Verse 30, and any person who does any work on that same day, that person I will destroy from among his people. Good night, nurse. God was not playing. Like, man, you do some work and I'll just destroy you. There's no discipline or, you'll be cut off or this. He's like, I'll just destroy you. Verse 30. Verse 31. You shall do no manner of work. It shall be a statute forever throughout your generations and all your dwellings. Why do you think, let me ask you a question. Why do you think God was so serious about them not doing work? Why is he telling them a couple of times here, repeating it? Don't do work at this time, on the Day of Atonement. Anybody? What do you think? Any guesses?
So God can do all the work?
So God could do all the work? Okay. So all the work is done by God. He's the one doing the atoning. Okay. Anybody else? Want to take a guess? Okay. What do you think? Cole?
You really need a break.
Yes. Really? Okay, good. Yeah, we really need a break. Yeah. Yeah. Anybody else? Anything else, Judd?
Well, God doesn't want you to have an excuse for why you can't spend time with him, or when he gives you like a day of rest.
Excellent. Yeah. Yeah. Very good. Yeah. Yeah. No excuses. No. Take the day off. But. You know, it's hard for me oftentimes to relax. I've got a million things to do, not just here, but I've got a house and a yard and a car and all the different things, and it's like, oh, I got a list of a million things to do, and God is saying, no, just, they'll be there tomorrow. Just relax. Don't use it as a day to do extra work. The Day of Atonement, did I finish reading verse 32. It shall be to you a Sabbath of solemn rest. You shall afflict your souls. On the 9th day of the month at evening, from evening to evening, you shall celebrate your Sabbath. The Day of Atonement not only speaks of the ultimate perfect atonement Jesus offered on our behalf, but also of the affliction, salvation that Israel will see during the Great Tribulation. It will truly be a time when the soul of Israel is afflicted, but their ultimate salvation, Jeremiah 30, verse 7, speaks of it. It says, alas, for that day is great, so that none is like it, and it is the time of Jacob's trouble, but he shall be saved out of it. Through the affliction comes salvation. Beautiful news. That it's not just affliction and then the end. The Feast of Tabernacles at verse 33. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the children of Israel, saying, the 15th day of the 7th month shall be the Feast of Tabernacles for 7 days to the Lord. I love that. 7 days, man. 7 days. On the 15th day of the Jewish month Tishri, the Feast of Tabernacles was a time to rejoice in God's deliverance and provision for Israel during the time of wilderness wandering. A time when, having come into the promised land, they could look back with gratitude on all that God had done to deliver and provide in the tough times of the wilderness. So they're looking forward to the time when they'll be in the promised land and being able to look back on God's goodness. Now that's something that you and I can do right now. We look back on God's goodness. I don't know how often you do that, but that's something that we want to do. I was talking with a mom yesterday. I have been discipling her son, and there's been some family trouble there. And we were talking about we were talking about how her kids, and I think I've done this. I did this when I was growing up, and you might be doing it now. And that is, we look at our parents and the things that they do for us, like paying the electricity bill, paying for gas, gas in the house. Like, so you have hot water. Oh, and they pay for water. And they pay to have the trash picked up. You don't have to take it somewhere or take it to the backyard and burn it, you know. Like buying new clothes, socks, chonies, man, toothpaste, a toothbrush, you know. You could just do toothpaste, like put it on your finger, man, just scrub it. But all the different things that they provide. And oftentimes we in our minds we think, they have to. I'm not 18 yet. It's your responsibility, you know. And we can take them for granted and not have any gratitude for what they do. And I was talking to this young mom, and you know that her kids are thinking that way. You know, they can go like, "What have you done for me? What have I done for you? Let me just list it off." You know, 50 things later. You know, like, what do you mean? What have I done for you? And we can oftentimes do that with God, where we get into a mindset of, well, hey, I mean, we're supposed to have a room. It's just, you know, it's just normal. It's just natural. This is what we do. Do you know? You don't know this. I'll share this with you. Okay, you want to know? I'll tell you anyways. Okay, when I first started in youth ministry so many years ago, I was at a tiny little church, and we did not have enough room for the youth group in the church. It was so small, the church building. So we obviously met on Sundays. So the dentist office that we shared a driveway with was not open on Sundays. So our youth group would meet in the driveway. And then later on, we bought or rented the little house directly across the street, but we still didn't get a room. What we got was the back patio. So if it rained before that, there was no youth group. We just had to go inside. After that, if it rained, we could still meet because we were out on the back patio and we had some cover. That's just how it was. You know, it's like, this is what you got. You just work with it. But we can oftentimes come in here like, oh, we got, you know, air conditioning in the summer. We got heat in the winter. You know, we got the lights and the stage and the TVs. You got 2 TVs in here. What? And we can take all this stuff for granted. Like, well, I mean, it's just, you know, this is what God's supposed to do. You know, it's not a big deal. But we need to look back and be thankful for all that God has done. And this is all material stuff we're talking about. What has God done? God saved your nasty self so that you have the hope of eternity with him, so that you're looking forward to heaven. So we want to be in that mindset of looking back and going, oh, that's right. God has done so much for me. Verse 35, on the first day there shall be a holy assembly. You shall do no customary work on it. For 7 days you shall offer an offering made by fire to the Lord. On the 8th day you shall have a holy assembly again. You shall offer an offering made by fire to the Lord. It is a sacred assembly, and you shall do no customary work on it. The Feast of Tabernacles began and ended in rest. It was all about celebration, rest, refreshment. We see here also the great social good that God intended in the Sabbath and in the feasts. In other ancient cultures, there was no day off, and there were no holidays. Here, God commands both holidays and vacation days, all centered on him. Verse 37, these are the feasts of the Lord, which you shall proclaim to be holy convocations, to offer an offering made by fire to the Lord, a burnt offering, a grain offering, a sacrifice, drink offering, everything on its day. Besides the Sabbaths of the Lord, besides your gifts, besides all your vows, and besides all your free will offerings which you give to the Lord. Look at this in verse 39. Also on the 15th day of the 7th month, when you have gathered in the fruit of the land, you shall keep the feast of the Lord for 7 days. On the first day there shall be a Sabbath rest, and on the 8th day a Sabbath rest. And you shall take for yourselves on the first day the fruit of the beautiful trees, branches of palm trees, the boughs of leafy trees, and willows of the brook. And you shall rejoice before the Lord your God for 7 days. Party. You shall keep it as a feast to the Lord for 7 days in the year. It shall be a statute forever in your generations. You shall celebrate it in the 7th month. You shall dwell in booths for 7 days. All who are native Israelites shall dwell in booths. Just a moment ago, we talked about taking all these branches, and it's like, okay, what do they do with those? They would actually make booths for themselves. So even after they got into the promised land and they lived in houses, for a week during this Feast of Tabernacles, they were to go outside and build themselves little booths using branches from the trees and just whatever they could find, these little huts, and they were to live in them. Sounds so cool. Like, they go outside and just camp out for a while. Why did they do that? It was to remember that they during the wilderness wanderings that they were just living out in the open in tents, temporary housing. Verse 43, that your generations may know that I made the children of Israel dwell in booths when I brought them out of the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your God. The Feast of Tabernacles speaks of the millennial rest of comfort of God for Israel and all of God's people. It is all about peace and rest from beginning to end. Tabernacles is specifically said to be celebrated during the millennium. If you're taking notes, Zechariah chapter 14, verses 16 through 19. So in verse 44, Moses declared to the children of Israel the feasts of the Lord. But here, this last one, looking back and remembering, that's what God did for me. This is how he provided. And that's something that you and I want to do. That's the kind of mindset that you and I want to have. Looking back and remembering, what did God do? Can anybody right now tell me, what has God done for you in the past? Anybody just name something off?
Create the universe.
Created the universe. That's a good thing, yeah. Anybody else? Like, what? God hasn't done anything for me. Okay?
He does so much throughout our lives. He wakes us up in the morning, puts breath in our lungs,
Okay.
gets
Yeah.
us here safely,
Okay.
protects us.
So many things. You named off a few. You went to bed last night. You didn't think, okay, lungs, just keep breathing through the night. Heart, keep pumping blood. Okay, baby? Come on. You didn't do that. You just fell in your bed and you were dead to the world, right? You didn't know what was going on. The house could have been burning down. You wouldn't have known what was happening. Okay? What else has God done for you?
Give me a purpose.
Give you purpose. Okay, good. Yeah, it gives you purpose. Yes.
Giving us another day to live.
Yep.
To live
Yep.
for him.
Yep. This is the day. This is. Anybody remember that old song? Okay. What else has God done? Anything else? Cool. Free will. Okay. Yeah. Giving you the ability, the choice to make choices. Anything else?
His word.
His word. That's a good one. That's a good. I mean, they're all good, obviously, but yeah, he gave us his word. This instruction manual, this Bible, this Bible, these basic instructions before leaving Earth. Anything else?
The freedom to read his word.
Freedom to read his word. Okay. Yeah. Good. The ability to read it, to hear it, to see it, to know it. Yep.
Salvation
How did he do that?
by his son.
Bam. That's right. Oh, that's right. He sent Jesus. Yeah, he did that little thing too. Sent salvation. All right. He gave us salvation, saved us from our sin. So he's done so much. Don't you all just wish that you were living in the Ukraine right now?
No.
Why not?
The war.
Because there's a war going on. Oh, that's right. There's a war going on. Now, not that the Ukrainians aren't blessed by God. Okay, I'm not saying that. But aren't you glad that God allowed you to be born here without that trouble? Now, who knows, what will happen here, or, obviously there's trouble all over the place, different times and all of that, but we're living in an incredible country. A lot of people don't like it, and it's got a lot of problems, a lot of issues. I'll be the first to say that. It's got a checkered past, man. But this is still a great place to live, okay? You've been born into a certain family. Maybe you've been adopted into a family. But you're sitting here, and you're clothed, which is I'm very thankful for. Okay, that means that somebody's providing for you. You've got somebody that's helping you out. You go, well, I work, man. I buy my own clothes. Okay, well then somebody's allowing you to live in their house, so that you have money that you can spend on clothes. You're not paying the light bill and the water bill and the gas bill and the trash bill and all those different things. So we've got a lot to be thankful for, and we always want to be mindful of those things. Looking back and saying, oh yeah, that's right. God's provided so much. The biggest one by far is that God gave us Jesus. He gave his only son. What an incredible thought. He gave his only son for us, for you and I, to die, to pay for our sins. What an incredible thing. And then if you're here this morning and you haven't surrendered your heart to God, you want to do that. You want to understand that you're a sinner in need of salvation. And God provided that salvation through his son Jesus. And you want to say to God, God, I'm a sinner. I need to be saved. You sent your son for me, for us, but you sent your son also for me. And I need that salvation. I need to be forgiven of sins, and I want salvation, and I want the promise of eternal life, the hope of life everlasting. And surrender your heart to him. He's done so much for us. A couple quick announcements.